And we're off. Hey, everybody, this is Loren Baker, founder of Search Engine Journal. With me today, I have Jeremy Knauff. Is that the correct pronunciation, Jeremy?
That is the correct pronunciation, Loren.
Awesome. So, welcome to SEJ Live. Essentially, what we're doing here at SEJ Live is on a weekly basis. We review one of the most popular posts on Search Engine Journal of the week. And Jeremy contributed a post on the 21st called The Anatomy of a Webpage, How to Maximize SEO Impact. It's gotten almost 10,000 reads. It's getting residual traffic. So I thought this would be a great chance to really shine the light on Jeremy and his post and get down into the post a little bit, some of the takeaways. But first, I'd like to give you a chance to introduce yourself, Jeremy.
Thanks, Loren. So, I've been in the industry for a while. For a long time, I've been kind of behind the scenes. And prior to that, I served in the Marine Corps. And I've been running a digital marketing agency out here in Tampa for many years. And basically, we focus on the construction industry, but we work with, a variety of clients outside of that industry as well. Everything from web dev to SEO.
Cool. Okay. First of all, I didn't realize that you focused on construction. How'd you get into that?
So the short version of that is it's an industry that from a technology standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, they are so far behind most other industries. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And I chose that because aside from the opportunity, there's also a lot of really hardworking people. I mean, that's kind of the people that build the foundation or the backbone of the country. Right. So I felt like it was a good mix for me.
Very cool. So I'm not sure if you know this or not, but I lived in Tampa for 7 years, from around 2006 to 2012, 2013. So I miss it. You're telling me it's about 90 degrees and incredibly humid right now, I'm sure. Yeah. Right? I lived in the Carrollwood area. Whereabouts are you? You don't have to give your street address.
You're going to all go Google Maps me here in a minute. My office is actually in Carrollwood.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, mine was on Bush Boulevard and
Jesus Christ.
Can't
what
remember.
What complex were you in?
I think it's right across the street from where you are. We may have talked about this online once.
Okay.
I can't remember the name. It's called like Clover something. I believe.
Orange something. There's Orange Clover.
There's that Grove Road, so it's off of Bush and something Grove. Okay. Right behind the Publix and near Line Ball. It's near.
Okay. All right. Then you were probably less than a mile away at that time from where I am now.
Awesome. Well,
small world.
Yeah, the fact that we both used to live in Tampa and had offices close to each other, I'm sure is boring everyone else on here. So can you tell us a little bit about Spartan Media? Besides, working with construction companies, what particularly do you do and focus on from a digital marketing perspective?
So, we do everything from web development up to search engine optimization, social media, starting to dabble a little bit in video, but for the most part, it's web development and SEO. That's how I got into the industry, where I built my foundation, and I've kind of stuck to that since then.
Very cool. Yeah, Tampa's actually a little hotbed of internet marketers. Like, it seems like wherever there's good weather, first of all, the affiliate people tend to gravitate there. So Indeed. Clearwater is full of affiliate companies. And my wife actually used to work for, they used to be called Centec. I'm not sure the name of them now, but they're a large affiliate and direct mail company. Tampa's actually an old direct mail town. So a lot of those direct mail companies and marketing companies ended up transforming into digital. So made a lot of connections there. But let's move forward. Okay. So again, one of the most popular posts this week was Jeremy's post on the anatomy of a web page, how to maximize SEO impact. Before we get started going through each of the individual, sections of the site that you brought up, or the different body parts, what's one of the most, what do you feel is one of the most overlooked components of SEOing a web page?
So I don't think it's actually a component. I think it's more of a business approach or a mindset. Okay. And that is process, right? Yep. A lot of people, especially in our industry, they just want to do a thing. They want to do it however they feel like, no structure. They feel like it kind of constrains them. But in reality, when you have a documented process, you're able to get better results because you have a step-by-step framework to follow, and then you're able to be more creative in the aspects of that rather than trying to reinvent the wheel every time.
Right.
The other side of that is it's incredibly scalable. If you're just trying to wing things and throw things at the wall and see what sticks, then you're going to have a really hard time training your staff or freelancers, whoever out there is working on your projects.
Yep, I agree. And then not having a process, I've found, can keep you from the ability to bring on freelancers or employee or whatever is a gift, right? It's something that's special. And for you to grow as an agency or a consultancy, you really have to be able to do that. If you don't have a process, you can't do it, right? So early on, when I was growing my own agency back in the day, I would just hire people because I did not know how to scale myself. And then I found that I did not necessarily know how to take everything that was in my brain and put it down on a piece of paper, right? So it led to a lot of confusion. It took about 6 or 7 years to realize that everything had to be put in I actually fought against process for some of the same reasons you said. I think it's very kind of normal in this industry to shoot from the hip sometimes. And there's also a lot of folks that are SEOs that aren't necessarily business people, right? So when you go and you launch your own consultancy, some of the best money I ever spent at the New Agency Foundation Digital was hiring someone that was a process that just specialized in putting together process.
Right,
so
like
they
a process
came in,
engineer?
Yeah. So they came in as a third-party consultant, interviewed everybody at the company, right? Some people really didn't like it. Some people did. And then then we found out where the overlap was, what everyone was doing, and really put that together from a not only a process, but a standard operating procedure standpoint, right? And that let us, personal story, that's what has let us scale, is the fact that not everybody's doing everything differently, right? And doing it based upon what they feel is the best way to do something. So how has putting together a process helped you with bringing on freelancers or staff or anything for that matter?
So I think we all have the same problem, and that's we've got all this stuff in our head. We've got all this knowledge that we've built over the years. And if we don't put that into a system, there's no way to effectively bring these people on and scale them. When you have that, you can basically hand someone a map, so to speak, and they can go and run with it based on much briefer instructions.
Right.
And that frees up your time to focus on other aspects of the business.
Absolutely. And in our case, we're a virtual agency. We're hybrid. We're based in LA. We have a lot of folks here in LA, but we're virtual. We all work from our homes or coffee shops or WeWorks or whatever, bars, who knows. But having that is really important because it helps with overall communication. Like, what people are working on, what phase they're in, right? So I've noticed that's incredibly helpful. One moment.
Oh, there we go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. That's a great bridge into some of the components of the site anatomy that you had discussed. So let's start things off very simply, the title tag. What's something you'd like to say about the title tag?
This is one that I see kind of abused in just such gross negligence so often.
Right.
What I see often is two problems for the most part. One is old school, like keyword stuffing, garbage that nobody's ever going to be interested in. And the other is where you put too much into a title tag and it gets truncated to where most of your message is missing anyway. So those are the two most frequent problems that I see with the title tag. And the approach is to keep it within the appropriate length. And of course that varies a little bit. Google's, they say that they can go way higher than you typically end up seeing in the search results. But the idea is to make it something that's going to entice users to actually click through, because if you're just doing it for the search engines, if people aren't coming through, then you're not going to get any sales anyway. So it's a moot point.
Exactly. And then also, if you have a better title and description pairing, then if you're in a position 2, position 3, sometimes you can get a better click through or a much better click-through than you typically would in that position when you have a well-defined, almost like a narrative or an explainer in your title and description, and when you bring in things like rich snippets and stuff like that, right?
Right. On that note, something else I want to touch on, Loren, is you need to look at it from the perspective of the user, where I see a lot of businesses, and this doesn't just apply to the title, this is in communications in general. They talk about, themselves rather than what really matters to the customer, to the visitor.
Interesting. Could you give an example?
Well, you see people talking about things for just in general about, how many years they've been in business, or, that they're the largest XYZ type of company, whatever it is. A consumer doesn't care about any of that. They care about how you're going to solve their problem. So if you approach all of your writing, but title tags in this case, from that perspective of addressing how you're going to solve their unique problem, you're going to get a lot better results.
Very cool. Very cool. So in addition to the title, we talked about description. Any tips there in addition to what you just said?
I mean, same basic concept here. Don't go nuts stuffing it with keywords. Just write a message that's going to engage the visitors so that they'll actually want to click through. It doesn't have a direct impact on search, like a lot of people outside our industry don't know.
Right.
But it does affect click-through rates, which have a tremendous impact on overall effectiveness of your campaign.
Right. And then also not writing a description that can lead to Google trying to write their own, right? So,
right, and they often will do that even if you do have a description. And I found that if they do that, then you probably didn't write it very well.
Right. You're making them do extra work to figure out what your page is about. You don't want to make Google do extra work.
No.
Okay. Next up is breadcrumbs. Hansel and Gretel's first thing I think of when I see this. What do breadcrumbs have to do with a website?
So breadcrumbs basically. So first of all, they should mimic your overall URL architecture. It shouldn't just be a thing up there that you're just sticking in for SEO purposes. But what they do is they allow visitors to get a better idea of the context of that page and the overall scope of the website. They also help them to navigate back and forth. So if they get to a particular page and realize that that's not quite what they're looking for, it's very easy to jump back up to the previous level. And that also, of course, gives Google insight as to how the pages within your site relate to each other. So you're giving them context that they wouldn't otherwise be able to determine on their own.
Very cool. So do you usually have the breadcrumb mimic the URL structure 100%?
I can't think of a case where we haven't.
Okay. Yeah, the only thing that comes to mind on my side is you familiar with the Shopify URL structure with blogs and
I hate it with a passion.
And pages? Yeah. So Shopify has a tendency to give you phantom subdirectories, right? Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. Breadcrumbs, I think, are very important. And actually, the next component of your article is what I wanted to kind of talk about the most, because I think it's one of the most overlooked components of on-page SEO, yet it can be one of the, it can give you the most return or at the end of the day. And that's having jump links at the top of your page or a table of contents. Could you go into that a little bit, Jeremy?
Certainly. So for the people who don't know what this is that we're talking about, basically it's links within the page that will jump to other areas on that page rather than going to a different page. And where I find this valuable, so first of all, of course, just like with the breadcrumbs, it's going to give additional context to the search engines.
Right.
But from a user perspective, and this is where I find it to be most valuable, let's say I go and I search for something. I'm looking for a supercharger for a Yukon, right? I could go and find this huge page full of all kinds of information. I'm probably not going to sit there and read through all of that information. If I'm looking for specs on it, for example, if there's a link for specs, I'm going to click on that, jump straight down to where I am. If people don't find what they're looking for fairly quickly, or if you make them work for it, then a lot of times they'll just hit the back button and get out of there. If you make it easy for them to find exactly what they're looking for, you're going to deliver a better overall user experience. And that helps from a marketing side. And if you're delivering a great user experience, you're generally doing well in search as well.
Now, one question I have for you with the jump links is, you said that it really helps people find what they're looking for and stay on the site. Have you seen, do you have before and after numbers, or have you seen examples, or have examples that you've worked on where you've seen a shorter time on site, or maybe less pages visited, or a higher bounce rate, and then once putting together the jump links so that that's all done a 360?
So yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can look at that, because it's going to be, in some cases, they may spend less time on that page, but that could be because they found the information and then moved on to your contacts page, or moved on to the product page, or whatever the case
That's
is.
interesting.
Yeah. So you have to look at it from the bigger perspective of what is the goal? What are you trying to accomplish at that point? Or what is that specific subset of user trying to accomplish?
And then also those jump links sometimes may appear in the SERPs themselves, right? So you get a little bit of a bonus there from a CTR perspective, and predefining the fact that what people are looking for is actually on that page. So I think that helps kind of back it up. Okay, really interesting one. When anyone does a SEM rush or an Ahrefs crawl, subheads, headers, subheadings, whatever you want to call it, H1, H2, H3, how do you typically break that down, and why is it important?
All right. So first of all, I'm going to go to the user perspective first. People are intimidated when they see a large block of text, especially online, because it causes fatigue of the eyes. If you can break that up in a way that it's much more easily digestible, you're going to have people sticking around longer. And then again, online, they're scanning the page rather than individually reading each word. So when you break this up, they're scanning, they see a subhead, because of course it's larger, it's bolder, it's going to stand out more. So they see that it's got whatever it's about. For example, in the article, I talked about, in that article, I had an example from a previous article where one of the subheads was pruning outdated low quality content, which you guys did a webinar on not too long ago.
Exactly.
So if somebody goes to that page and that's what they're looking for as they're scanning down, that's going to pop right out at them. So it helps from that perspective. It also helps to give context to the search engines, as all of these elements do, where they're better understanding your content. They're understanding how the content relates to the other content on the page. And then when we talked earlier about the jump links, this is where you would be having those links jump to. So you would attach your named anchor into these subheads.
Got you. Now, if you're not using H2, H3, or if you're using H2 across the entire page, you typically see that as being an issue, or do you like to really kind of qualify or prioritize accordingly?
So I think
with your subheads.
Right. So I think in most cases, you're generally going to at least have a need for a second level heading, right? Every page is going to need an H1 and a couple of H2s. In some cases, they may need 3, may need to go down to 4. I generally haven't seen too many cases where you're going to go all the way down to 6. I don't know. Have you?
No.
Okay.
I typically stop at the H3. Like when you're in the WordPress dashboard, right? You see the drop down. Sometimes I select it just to see what it would look like, how the CSS is set for those. But no.
Yeah,
I've never seen an H6 in the wild before.
No, the farthest that I've ever seen is 4, and that's in very rare cases on very large pages.
Very cool. Very cool. So very good information there. Also, I like this. I like this example you gave in the post. And by the way, we'll be dropping the link and everything to this post. I wish I could screen share on the BeLive app. But this post, it's very well written from a scannability perspective. Actually, like really early on, one of my favorite bloggers, Brian Clark, over at Copy Blogger, was him and Sonia Simone were writing about scannability all the time, right? And I used to have a tendency to write like paragraphs, 3, 4, 5, 6 sentences until I saw what it looked like on a cell phone, you know? So if you think about it, if you write in not necessarily short bursts, short bursts, or almost the way that you would with an outline, right? Back when you were in 5th grade learning how to do outline with research, that's really the way to go. So don't overthink how much you have to write. Just write in something that people can easily understand with a quick glance. And I think that's a nice rule to stick to. Speaking of writing and scannability, lists, right? So why do you love lists so much?
So first of all, they have different formatting. So again, we're talking about scannability. Since they're formatted differently, generally you're going to see them inset a little bit, and then they're spaced out a little bit more in most cases, and they've got the bullets or numbers depending on which type of list you've got. That's going to draw the eye. If somebody's looking for specific types of data, that's generally where their eyes will gravitate towards. And then the other side of that is humans from a psychological perspective, we're always looking for patterns.
Yep.
Bullets or numbered lists present patterns, which kind of connects with our brain in a way that regular paragraphs don't.
Got you. Yeah, agreed 100%. And what number do you think is good from a list perspective? Do you stick with odd numbers? Do you go for 5s and the 10s, or like weird numbers like 7 and I don't know, 13?
I always like to try and do an odd number. I know that from a title perspective, odd numbers tend to get better click-throughs. I've never done any testing to see if odd versus even number lists have much of an impact one way or the other. But just because I know that people tend to engage better with odd number in a title, I like to do the same with lists.
Interesting. Yeah, to me, odd kind of always feels like there's something extra. Like you're so used to seeing even numbers. Like if it's a 7, it's like, oh, it's 6 plus 1.
There's that. The other aspect is it's like you're leaving something, so they're wanting. It's almost like leaving an ellipsis. Like they're like, what's next? You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly. By the way, Troy Reddington says hi. Hey, Troy. What's up?
Hey, Troy.
Looking forward to seeing what you're going to be smoking out on the grill this weekend, Memorial Day weekend. Also, Beth Ann Ball says, Jeremy, she loves capital LOVE, all of your articles, and make sure that everybody at the office reads them. So that's super cool.
Thank you, Beth.
Okay, so last is images, right? Images can often be overlooked, but the more you start discussing the importance and ways to optimize images for your posts, how to put them into your posts, everything else, it can turn into one of the biggest arguments online from a publishing perspective. So what do you really think the value is that images give to a page at the end of the day?
So there's the old adage that an image is worth 1,000 words, and I think that's definitely true. The caveat there is it has to add value. And that's the case with any content, but it's especially true with images, right? Where I see a lot of people go wrong is they'll just have some stock photo of a bunch of people shaking hands or everybody's cheering. You know, that doesn't do anything for the visitor. That's just purely there from an aesthetic or from an SEO perspective. So the image should provide more context. For example, we were looking at some images to include on the client's website. And in this particular case, it was about hair follicle drug testing, right? So rather than taking photos of, the test kit, which is relevant, or rather than, random photos of people working, one of the things we wanted to do was kind of take a photo of, how you probably have seen this in your old elementary school textbooks, the picture of the skin layer and the hair follicle and all that stuff. Like that's an example of an image that would add value.
Yeah.
It
kind of looks like a lasagna with big pieces of hair coming out the top. Yep.
Right.
Okay. All right. Go ahead. Sorry.
So beyond that is we want to make sure that it's optimized from a speed perspective as well, though, because especially with mobile, which is comparable to, I know you and I are a little bit older, we grew up when we still had dial-up internet. That's comparable to what mobile is these days. So if you're slowing that down, then you're going to turn off a lot of users. I know that Google's really been pretty heavy on page speed. So that's an important factor there as well. And then all of the regular stuff that we expect, the alt attributes, naming the image file properly, things like that.
So if someone gets a really large image, right, obviously just huge size,
right?
Should they, in the code, shrink it down from what it was originally to what fits in the page, or how can that image be optimized?
So the image, first of all, the image should be no larger than the largest it will actually be displayed on the page. Source set is another great thing to work with here, which basically delivers to the browser only the image that's going to be the right size. And that's something, if I recall correctly, that's kind of built into WordPress.
Not sure off the top of my head.
Yeah, I can't recall. But basically, you want the image to be no larger than the size that it's actually displayed. The problem with resizing it inside the browser or inside the code basically is you're still delivering that entire image. So if it's 200 kilobytes, it's still 200 kilobytes, even if you shrink it down in the code. So having the actual correct dimensions is critical.
Excellent. Thank you for that explanation. I think it's quite helpful. I want to skip over video a little bit because we're doing video right now, and video can be very useful and get people in. I want to talk a little bit about schema. I kind of touched upon it a bit with rich snippets and really the review snippets, the ability to get stars and a rating next to your listing. So how do you find schema useful, and what are some of your default go-tos from a schema perspective?
Okay, so schema is useful from the perspective of it changes how your result looks in the search results. In the article, I included an example image of an Amazon listing which had star ratings on it. So that's an example of the reviews that you were talking about. If you're doing this and your competitors aren't, it's going to give you an advantage because the eye is going to be drawn to that. It's going to increase your click-through rate. Right. If everyone's doing it, well, then you just need to get on the ball and do it. It's not an option at that point. But there's a lot of them. In fact, they recently introduced what was it? Frequently asked questions. But you've also got businesses and organizations. You've got events, people, products. There's really a lot of them, and Google offers tools for implementing it and testing it, making sure it all works properly. And then I don't know if you've messed around with Yoast's new plugin where they're now doing more of the schema. I haven't had a chance to play with that yet.
Yeah, honestly, I haven't. At SEJ, we custom build a lot of our schema. There's a couple of different sites that I work on that I want to. It's kind of on my to-do list for this weekend. Okay. Because the extra day and everything.
Sounds like you have the same understanding of a vacation than I do.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, catch up a little bit. Catch up and experiment. But no, I haven't. But one thing we've been doing a lot of implementation of is business, individual, the same as command, everything on that front to really show Google at the end of the day, not only what a company is, but who it is. Like when it was founded, what's the name of the CEO, how many staff does it have, everything else. Not only is that beneficial to show Google, it helps with the EAT at the component at the end of the day. But expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. But it also, all that information is utilized and populated in your knowledge graph, right? So if someone is doing a branded search about your company and you have all of that set up within your schema, Google will take that information and populate the knowledge graph accordingly. So sometimes you'll see when you start to kind of pop the graph, so to speak, you'll just see like company name. If you're on Wikipedia, that's amazing. You'll see the Wikipedia link pick up almost automatically. And then you'll see like blocks with competitors at the bottom, which is like, oh man, really?
Yeah, so, that part's not great.
Yeah. But once you have your schema set up, where you can do this within Yoast too. I mean, Yoast has had this for a long time, where you can set up your social accounts within Yoast SEO, and then that populates the same as component of the schema. But then adding the things like, the company owner, where you're based, your address, all of that stuff, address, employees, that will populate in the knowledge graph, which is pretty amazing at the end of the day, particularly for branded searches, but branded queries are still important, right? Especially if you're working with businesses that are constantly marketing themselves offline.
Right. Something important to touch on here is if you've got various plugins, and I know there was an issue with the Genesis and Yoast kind of conflicting for a while about the schema. I think that was fixed, but it's important to make sure that you don't have schema conflicting with other schema on your page. And that's where the Google, I forget what it's called. I'm drawing a blank right now, but there's a tool they offer for testing your schema. And then tools like Yext will test all of your pages and make sure that everything's correct as well. So that's something important to consider.
Yeah, their structured data tool is pretty good for testing your schema. Like I've run pages on there where it's set up perfectly. I've run pages on there where there's like 3 different layers of article schema set up with like different author names and everything else across the board. And then also once we get into e-commerce, right, talking about Shopify earlier, the whole Google merging Search Console with Merchant Center, I think is one of the best ideas ever, right? Because if you're an e-commerce company, chances are you have a shopping feed that you upload to Google Shopping. Well, Search Console will pull all that data in. Problem is when that data is different than what you have on site from a schema perspective, which is something you have to fix at the end of the day. So making sure that you don't have inconsistencies across your code or your schema in the same way you don't want duplicate content on your site or similar pages or things like that at the end of the day is really important. Mixed signals, Google is not like mixed signals.
No, and they are certainly having a hard time with a lot of things right now, so let's not complicate it. Something I want to touch on schema real quick is, I think it was the last episode of Webcology. Jim Hedger and Dave Davies interviewed Chris Reagan and went super deep into schema. So that's definitely an episode that I recommend everyone checking out.
Okay, cool. Send me over a link and I'll drop that,
we'll do that
in here as well, even though it's Webmaster Radio. We'll go ahead and spread the love a little bit. Okay, Jeremy, anything else you want to say before we sign off? We're about a half hour in now. This has been fantastic, by the way.
Thank you.
Really educational.
Just, I mean, as far as a closing statement, I think it all comes down to focusing on really delivering real value to your users, and it kind of all pans out from there.
All right, excellent. So everybody, this is Jeremy Knauff from Spartan Media in Tampa, Florida. Any big plans for this weekend? You're a veteran. Tampa's a huge military town.
It is. Right? I, like you, will be working.
Okay, maybe throw back a beer or something if you have a chance, or a soda. So again, thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks a lot, Jeremy, as well.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be sharing the post, and then once you send over that link, that Webcology link, we'll be sharing it as well. So again, it's been awesome. Have a great day. Everyone enjoy your weekend, and happy Friday.
Thanks, Loren. Everybody have a great weekend.